As the 100-day barrier nears, Trump is doubly screwed in a bigly way, because the man made insane promises that he couldn't keep are terrible, and he also made zero friends while trying to fulfill said promises. And the majority of Americans are not happy.
Just how Americans think the president is doing as we approach day 100. In short, not well.
But in Trump's mind, he's done a lot. We don't know what exactly, but he thinks a lot has been done.
No administration has accomplished more in the first 90 days.
President Trump firing back with this tweet: no matter how much I accomplish during the ridiculous standard of the first 100 days, and it has been a lot, including Supreme Court, media will kill.
Is it a ridiculous standard? Because the history behind it goes back to FDR's first 100 days, who, by the way, despite your claims, did a lot more than you. But the symbolic status of the standard is not a matter of debate, since you yourself set that standard, Trump, with a lengthy speech called Contract with the American Voter back in October.
What follows is my 100-day action plan to make America great again.
And yes, you might have guessed it, but he fucking failed. Like a lot. Let's begin.
And it begins with bringing honesty, accountability, and change to Washington, D.C.
This is hilarious because the only things Trump brought to D.C. were more billionaires and Goldman members, a rollback of sensible environmental protections, bigoted immigration policies, and failed promises. Well, all that, and he also brought his racist butt buddy, walking eczema tissue Steve Bannon. But his influence is reportedly diminished, and he's been replaced by less racist, but also somehow less qualified son-in-law Jared Kushner. But let's look at his six-pronged approach to draining the Washington swamp, as he calls it.
First, a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on all members of Congress.
Didn't happen, which is understandable since, only 27 of those have been ratified in 230 years. But maybe you shouldn't have promised that for your first 100 days, Donald. That was like the first thing you promised. But to be honest, I'm still holding out hope for this one since it's one of the few promises he's made that I agree with.
Second, a hiring freeze on all federal employees to reduce federal workforce through attrition.
Now, this is a Republican boner signal for small government, and Trump has stood by this promise. It's in the works, even though the hiring freeze was lifted this month. But let me ask you this, Donald. Is this also why you haven't appointed hundreds of sub-cabinet appointees at this point, which is unprecedented? Or do you also wish to fill all of those seats with Jared Kushner as well? Now let's move on to some things you actually delivered on, Trump.
A 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave government service. A lifetime ban on White House officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. A complete ban on foreign lobbyists raising money for American elections.
Now, these were executive orders that Trump signed, and they're about curbing the influence of lobbyists. And I agree with that largely, except, if you recall, Trump's campaign team is currently under investigation for undue Russian influence throughout the campaign because of lobbyists like Paul Manafort, who was Trump's campaign advisor, who recently registered as a foreign agent. And by the way, he's not the only one. He's the second person after Mike Flynn, who did the same exact thing after leaving the Trump administration, which, is pretty hypocritical. So even on promises that Trump has fulfilled, he still manages to look like an asshole. And then there are the clear flip-flops.
I will direct my Secretary of the Treasury to label China a currency manipulator.
Went back on that real quick, haven't you?
On China, President Trump tells the Wall Street Journal they're not currency manipulators.
But it's not just China Trump flip-flopped on. He's also failed to fulfill almost every other promise.
Cancel every unconstitutional executive action, memorandum, and order issued by President Obama.
Yeah, you canceled, zero. Except there was an unconstitutional executive action that was canceled. Yours.
We're going to suspend immigration from terror-prone regions where vetting cannot safely occur.
Remember that little gem that you tried to push twice and it failed because you promoted it to all of your racist, conservative followers as a Muslim ban? Yeah, that was dope. And then there were things that you straight up forgot about, like
Middle-Class Tax Relief and Simplification Act.
I guess that wasn't that important, right? Fuck the middle class. Whatever happened to that thing, Trump? But Trump's greatest gem was and always will be this promise.
The Repeal and Replace Obamacare Act.
Now, Trump repeated this promise hundreds of times throughout his campaign. This was something Republicans like Paul Ryan got a serious hard-on over. Something Republicans desperately tried to fail for the past 7 years, even if it hurt their constituents. So what happened?
President Trump is about to address the first major defeat. The president backing down on the signature issue of repealing Obamacare.
That was a great big failure and a promise he almost made as repeatedly as his great big wall. Which, what happened to the great big wall?
End Illegal Immigration Act. Fully funds the construction of a wall on our southern border. Don't worry about it. Remember, I said Mexico's paying for the wall.
Except the wall won't be paid for by Mexico, will it? Turns out the funding for that shitty wall could lead to Trump's most symbolic failure that is yet to come this week. If Trump and the Republicans try to include defunding Planned Parenthood or funding for a border wall in the upcoming spending bill that needs to pass by midnight of April 28th, Senate Democrats will filibuster, effectively shutting down the government until those items are removed or a continuing resolution is passed. That is, unless a stopgap bill that continues funding Congress at the same rate is passed this week, which could happen. But if it doesn't, Donald will add this massive failure onto his shitty resume of his first 100 days in office. Think about it, Donald Trump is such a bad president that Congress will stop working on his 100th day in office if he fails to fund the Congress. Oh my God, that is so delicious. So all in all, Trump's not fully wrong. He's definitely done more than any other president. He's done worse than any other president, that's a thing. But I guess the bright side is that Trump has failed so much in his first 100 days that he possibly won't be able to keep up with that momentum. So that's something we can look forward to.
I actually think this may be the worst 100 days we've ever seen in a president.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at HassanDPiker and on Twitter at Hassan the Hun. And this has been The Breakdown.